Okay. Hallelujah. No one, now you pray for us.
Sure. Lord, we bless your holy name this morning. Lord, we thank you for the goodness of your heart and your ways, and Lord, the standards that you have created and uphold in the midst of those who you seek to work through and to speak to. Lord, I thank you for, Lord, the peculiar ways that you have called us out to your purposes. And Lord, I do ask for our hearts, Lord, that we would engage with a genuineness and a fullness that can only come through a recognition of the move of your spirit, Lord, in a familiarity with your own heart and with your ways, Lord, which only comes through a true and consistent practice of them, to live them out as a way of life. And Lord, I do ask that you would bless the time this morning, that you continue to inspire us, Lord, and encourage us, and also even enlighten and correct, Lord, through this reading, that would, Lord, learn from it, Lord, hear your spirit through it. I do bless it in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Well, we start a new book now. That's good. Exodus, man. So, okay. So,
I'm gonna unfortunately have to have you do all the reading this morning because I brought my backpack to the cafe yesterday and my Kindle was in it and I left it there.
oh, is that right? Okay. So,
I don't have my device.
okay. No worries. You should be able to download this book on iBook. So, whatever the Apple book. So,
Maybe I do have it on there. Let me check.
yeah. So,
I don't remember.
all computer have a Kindle anyway. So,
Oh, that's true. That's very true, actually.
yeah.
Yeah. So you can go ahead. I'll catch up with you.
Okay. So we start with the book Exodus. Four shaping centuries. Now these are the names of the children of Israel which came into Egypt. Every man in his household came with Jacob. Reuben, Simon, Levi, and Judah. Issachar, Zebulun, and Benjamin, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. And all the souls that came out of the loins of Jacob were 17 souls. For Joseph was in Egypt already, and Joseph died, and all his brethren, and all that generation. And the children of Israel were fruitful and increased abundantly and multiplied, and waxed exceedingly mighty, and the land was filled with them. Now there rose up a new king over Egypt, which knew not Joseph, and he said unto the people, Behold, the people of the chosen Israel are more and mightier than we. Come on, let us deal wisely with them, lest they multiply, and it can come to pass that when there falleth out any war, they join also unto our enemies. I fight against us, and to get them up out of the land. Therefore the deed set over them taskmaster to afflict them with their burdens, and they build for Pharaoh treasure cities, Pithom and Rameses. But the more they afflict them, the more they multiply and grew. And they were great because of the chosen Israel. But the Egyptians made the chosen Israel to serve with rigor, and they made their lives bitter with hard bondage in mortar, in brick, and in all manner of service in the field. All the service wherein they made them serve was with rigor. Exodus 1 to 14. The 400 years of Israel's stay in Egypt were divided into two unequal periods. In the former, a longer of which they were prosperous and favored, while in the latter they were oppressed. Both periods had their uses of place in the shaping of the nation and its preparation for the Exodus. Both carry permanent lessons. 1. The long days of the unclouded prosperity. This extended over centuries, the whole history of which is summed up in two words: death and growth. The calm years glided on, as the shepherds in Goshen had the happiness of having no annals. All that needed to be recorded was that, one by one, the first generation died off, and that the new generations were fruitful, increased abundantly, and multiplied and waxed exceedingly mighty. The emphatic repetitions recall the original promises in Genesis 12:2, 17:4 and 5, and 18:18. The preceding specification, the number for the original settlers, repeated from Genesis. What number is that? That's a
46, I think.
46:27. Bring to impressive contrast the small beginnings and the rapid increase. We may note that eloquent setting side by side of the two processes which are ever going on simultaneously, death and birth. One by one, men pass out of the warmth light into the darkness, and so gradually does the withdrawal proceed that we scarcely are aware of its going on. But alas, all that the generation had vanished. The old trees is all cleared off the ground, and everywhere the place is taken by the young samplings. The web is ever being woven, and one end is run down at the other. The individual withers, but the race is more and more. All Solomon and continual play of opposing movements is, that the whole blind we are to its solemnity. The long period for growth may be regarded in two lights. It affects the convergence of a horde into a nation by numerical increase, and so as a link in the chain of the divine working. The great increase of which the writer speaks so strongly was no doubt due to the favorable circumstances of the life in Goshen, but was nonetheless regarded by him, and rightly so, as God's doing. As the psalmist sings, he increases the people greatly. Natural processes are the implements of a supernatural will. So Israel was being multiplied, at the end of which it was peacefully growing into a multitude was hidden from all but God. But there was another end, in reference to which the years of peaceful prosperity may be regarded, namely, the schooling of the people to patient trust in the long-delayed fulfillment of the promise. Then I hope that burned bright in Joseph when he died, and he being dead yet spake of it from his coffin to the successive generations. Delay is fitted and intended to strengthen faith and make hope more eager. But that part of the divine purpose, alas, was not affected as the former was. In the moral region, every circumstance had two opposite results possible. Each condition has, at its word, two handles, and we can take it by either, and generally taken it by the wrong one. Whatever is meant to better us may be so used by us to worsen us. And the history of Israel in Egypt and in the desert shows only too plainly that it is weakened if it did not kill faith. And the Goshen was so pleasant that it draws the hope, the wish for Canaan out of mind. While the bridegroom tarried, they all slumbered and slept. Is not Israel in Egypt slacking hold of the promise because it tarried, a mirror in which the church may see itself? And do we not know the innovating influence of Goshen making us reluctant to shoulder our packs and turn out for the pilgrimage? The desert repels more strongly than Canaan attracts. 2. The shorter period of oppression, probably the rise of a new king, means a revolution which a native dynasty expelled the foreign monarchs. The pharaoh's oppression was Pamper's great Ramesses II, whose long reign for 67 years gives ample room for protracted grinding oppression for Israel. The policy adopted was characteristic of these early despotisms in its utter disregard of humanity and for everything that making the kingdom safe. It was not intentionally cruel, it was merely indifferent to the suffering it occasioned. Let's deal wisely with them, never mind about justice, not to say kindness. Pharaoh's politics, like those of some other rulers who divorced them from morality, turned out to be impolitic. Its wisdom proved to be roundabout folly. It was afraid that the Israelites, if they were allowed to grow, might find out the strength to seek to emigrate. And so set work to weaken them with hard bondage, not seeing that that was sure to make them wish the very thing that it was blunderingly tried to prevent. The only way to make men glad to remain in a community is to make them at home there. The sense of injustice is the strongest disintegrating force. If there is a dangerous class, the surest way to make them more dangerous is to treat them harshly. It was a blunder to make lives bitter, for hearts also were embittered. To the people ripened for revolt, and Goshen became less attractive. God used Pharaoh's foolish wisdom as he had used natural law to prepare for the Exodus. The long years of ease had multiplied the nation. The period of oppression was to stir them up out of their comfort and nest, to make them willing to risk the bold dash for freedom. Is not that the explanation, too, of the similar times in our lives? It needs that we should experience life's sorrows and burdens to find how hard the world service is, and how quickly our Goshens may become places of grievous toil, in order that the weak hearts which cling so tightly to the earth may be detached from it, and taught to reach outward to God. Blessed is the man in whose heart are thine ways, and happy is he who so profits by his sorrows that they stir up in him the pilgrim's spirit, and make him yearn after Canaan, and not grudge to leave Goshen. Our ease and our troubles, opposite to the same and are meant to further the same end, to make us fit for the journey which leads to rest and home. We often misuse them both, letting the one sink us In earthly delights of living the great hope, the other embitter our spirits without impelling them to seek the things that are above. Let's use one for thankfulness, growth, and patient hope, and the other for riding deep the conviction that is not our rest, and making firm the resolve that we will gird our loins and staff in hand to go forth on the pilgrim road, not shrinking from the wilderness, because we see the mountains of Sinai across its sandy flats. I will continue here, okay? So, death and the growth. And Joseph died, and all his brethren, and all that generation. And the chosen Israel were fruitful, increased abundantly, and multiplied and waxed exceedingly mighty. Exodus 1, 6, and 7. These remarkable words occur in a short section which makes a link between the book of Genesis and of Exodus. The writer recapitulates the list of the immigrants into Egypt in the household of Jacob, then, as it were, having got them there, he clears the stage to prepare for a new set of actors. These few words are all that he cares to tell us about the period somewhat longer than that which separates us from the great Protestant Reformation. He knows that the two processes, the silent dropping away and the silent growth, Joseph died, and all his brethren, that all that generation. Plant by plant, the leaves drop, the stem rots, and the place is empty. Seed by seed, the tender green sparklets pierces the mud, the field will luxuriant in the breeze and the sunshine. The children of Israel were fruitful and increased abundantly. Now, then let's look at this twofold process which is always at work: silent dropping away and silent growth. It seemed to me that the writer, probably unconsciously being profoundly impressed with certain features that are dropping away, reproduced them most strikingly in the word structure of his sentence. Joseph died, and all his brethren, and all that generation. The uniformity, the fate, and the separate times in which it befell individuals are strongly set forth in the clauses, which sounds like the threefold falls of earth on the coffin. They all died, but not all at the same time. They went one by one, till at the end they were all gone. The two things that appeal to our imagination ought to appeal to our consciences and wills in reference to the succession of the generation of men are given very strikingly, I think, in the language of my text, namely, the stealthy assault of death upon the individuals, and its final, complete victory. If any of you were ever out at sea and look over a somewhat stormy water, you will have noticed, I dare say, how strangely the wide crests of the breakers disappear, as if some force acting from beneath had plucked them under, and over the spot where they gleamed for a moment round the blue sea. So the waves break over the great ocean of time, I may say, like a swimmer's pulled under by sharks. Man after man, get twitched down, till in the end Joseph died, and all his brethren, and all that generation. There's another process going on side by side with this in the vegetable world. Spring and autumn are two different seasons. May rejoices in green leaves and opening bud and nests with their young broods, but winter days are coming, when the greenery drops, the nests are emptied, the birds are flown. But the singular impressive thing which we should see if we were not so foolish and blind, which the writer of our text lays a finger upon, is that at the same time the two opposite processes of death and renewal are going on, so that if you look at the facts from the one side they see nothing but a charnel horse and Golgotha that we live in, while a scene from the other side is a scene for rejoicing, budding young life, and growth. You get the two processes in the closest juxtaposition in ordinary life. There's many a house where there is a coffin upstairs and a cradle downstairs. The churchyard is often the chosen playground. The web is being run down at the one end, and woven at the other. Wherever we look, every moment dies a man. Every moment one is born. Joseph died, and all his brethren. In all that generation, the chosen Israel multiplied exceedingly. But there's another thought here, and that of the contemporaneousness of the two processes, that is, as it is written on John Wesley's monument in Westminster Abbey, God buried the workman and carries on the work. The great vizier, who seemed to be the only protection of Israel, is lying in a coffin in Egypt. And all these truculent brothers of his that has tormented him, they are gone, and the whole generation is swept away. What of that? They were the depositories of God's purposes for a little while. Are God's purposes dead because the instrument that impart wrought them are gone? By no means. If I might use a very vulgar proverb, there are as good fish in the sea as ever come out of it, especially if God casts a net. So when the one generation had passed away, there is another to take up the work. The text is a fitting introduction to the continuance of the history of a first unfolding of God's plan, which occupied the book of Exodus. 2. Such being the twofold process suggested by this text, let us next note the lessons which it enforces. In the first place, let us be quite sure that we give it its due weight in our thoughts and lives. Let us be quite sure that we never give an undue weight to the one half, the whole truth. There are plenty of people who are far too much, constitutionally and perhaps by reason of a mistaken notion of religion, religiously inclined to be the contemplation of the more melancholy side of these truths, as there are a great many people who are far more exclusively disposed to the contemplation of the other. But the bulk of us never trouble our heads about either the one or the other, but go on, forgetting altogether that the sweet, sudden, stealthy, scheming hand that it might go back to my former metaphor is put out to lay hold of the swimmer and pull him under the water, which will clamp us by the ankles one day and drag us down. Do you ever think about it? If not, surely you are leaving out of sight one of what ought to be the formative elements in our lives. And then on the other hand, when our hearts are faint, when the pressure of human mortality, our own, that of our dear ones, or that of others, seem to weigh us down, and when it looks to us as if God's work was a failing for want of people to do it, let us remember the other side, and the chosen Israel increased and waxed exceedingly mighty, and the land was filled with them. So we shall keep the middle path, which is the path of safety, and so avoid the folly of extremes. But then more particularly, let me see this double contemplation, the two processes under which we lay all the stimulus to service. He ought to say to us, do you cast in your lot with that work which is going to be carried on through the ages? You see to it that your little task is in the same line of direction and the great purpose which God is working out, the increasing purpose which runs through the ages. The ages. Our individual life is a mere little backwater, as it were, in the great ocean. But its meaninglessness does not matter if only the great tidal wave which rolls away out there in the depths at the distance among its fathomless abysses tell us also on the tiny pole far inland and connected with the sea by some narrow, long fjord. That's an interesting word, never heard that one. I can see channel and a connection, See, for fjord. A long, narrow, deep inlet of the sea between high cliffs, as in Norway, typically formed by submergence of glacier. Okay. If my little life is a part of that great ocean, may the ebb, the flow, will alike act on it and make it wholesome. If my work is done in and foregone, I shall never have to look back to see, as we certainly shall see one day, either here or yonder, unless our lives be thus part of the divine plan. What a fool I was! 70 years for toil and the mauling, the efforts, the sweat, it all come to nothing, like a long algebraic sum that covers the pages with intricate calculations, the pluses and the minuses, the minuses, to balance each other, and the net result is a great round knot. So let us remember the twofold process. Let us steer us to make sure that in our embers shall be something that does live, that not nature, but something better. God remembers what was so fugitive. It is not fugitive, it is a part of the mighty whole. Before let this double contemplation make us were content with doing insignificant and unfinished work. Joseph might have said when he lay dying, well, perhaps I made a mistake after all. I should not have brought these people down here, even if I have been led hither. I don't see that I have helped them one step towards the possession of the land. Do you remember the old proverbs about certain people who should not see half-finished work? All our work in this world has to be only what the physiologists call functional. God has a great scheme running on through ages. Joseph gave it as a helping hand for a time, and then somebody else takes up the running and carries the purpose forward a little further. A great many hands are placed on the ropes that draw the car, the ruler of the world, the one after another. They get stiffened in death. But the car goes on. We should be contented to do our little bit of the work. Never mind whether it is complete, smooth, rounded or not. Never mind whether it can be isolated from the rest, held up, and the people can say he did that entire thing unaided. That is not the way for most of us. A great many threads go to make the piece of a cloth, and a great many throws of a shuttle to weave the web. A great many bits of glass make up the mosaic pattern. There is no reason for the red bit to pride itself on its fairy glow, or the green bit to boast of its silvery coolness. They're all parts of the pattern. So long as they keep their right places complete, the artist is on. Thus, if we think for one choice, the other replaces, we may be content to receive half-done work from our fathers, and to hand on unfinished tasks to them that come after us. It's not a great trial for a man modesty, if he lives near Jesus Christ, to be content to do but a very small bit of the master work. And the last thing that I would say is that this double process is going on all around us. Lift our thoughts to Him who lives forever. Moses dies. Joshua catches the torch from his hand. And the reason why he catches the torch from his hand is because God said, "As I was with Moses, I will be with thee." Therefore, we have to turn away in our contemplations from the mortality that has swallowed up so much wisdom and strength, eloquence, and power, which the church or our own hearts seem to so sorely to want. And while we do, we have to look up to Jesus Christ and say, He lives. He lives. No man is indispensable for public work or for private affection and solace so long, and there is a living Christ for us to hold by. Dear brethren, we need that conviction for ourselves often. When life seems empty and hope dead, and nothing is able to fill the vacuity or still the pen, we have to look at the vision, the Lord sitting on the empty throne, high and lifted up, and yet very near the aching, the worried heart. Christ lives, and that is enough. So the separate workers in all the generations who did a little bit of service, like the many generations of builders who labored through centuries upon the completion of some great cathedral, will be united at the last. And he that sows and he that reaps shall rejoice together in the harvest, which was produced by not the sower nor the reaper, but by him who blessed the toil of both. Joseph died, and all his brethren, and all that generation. But Jesus lives, and therefore his people grew and multiplied. And his servants' work is blessed, and at the end they shall be knit together in the common joy of the great harvest, and for the day when the headstone is brought forth with shoutings of grace, grace unto it. Allow me to continue. The ark among the flags. And when the man of the house of Levi took his wife, a daughter of Levi, and the woman conceived, bare a son. And when he saw him, there was a goodly child, hid him 3 months. And when he could not longer hide him, took for him an ark of bulrushes, and dabbed it with the slime of the peach, and put the child therein, and laid it in the flanks by the river's brink. And his sister stood afar off, to wait what would be done to him. And the daughter of Pharaoh came down to wash herself in the river, and her maidens walked along by the river's side. And when she saw the ark among the flags, she sent her maid to fetch it. And when she had opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the baby wept. And she had compassion on him, and said, "This is one of the Hebrew children." And said his sister to Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and call to thee a nurse for the Hebrew women, that she may nurse the child for thee?" And the Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Go." And the maid went and called the child mother. And the Pharaoh's daughter said unto her, "Take the child away, and nurse it for me, and I'll give thee thy wages." And the woman took the child and nursed it. And the child grew, and she brought him unto Pharaoh's daughter, and she became her son. And she called his name Moses, as she said, because I draw him out of the water. Exodus 2, 1-10. 1. It's remarkable that all the persons in this narrative are nominals. We know that the names of the man of the house Levite, his wife, were Amram and Jezebel. Miriam was probably the actual sister who washed what became of the little coffin. The daughter of Pharaoh has two names in Jewish tradition, one of which corresponds to that of which a brooch as found to have been borne by wonderful Ramesses who were numerous daughters. One like to think that is the name of the gentle-hearted woman and come down to us, but whether she was called Mary or not, she and the others have no name here. The reason can scarcely have been ignorance, but they are at their work kept in shadow because the historian saw and wished us to see that a higher hand was at work, and that over all the events recorded in these verses, there brought the informing, guiding spirit of God Himself, and the sole actor. Each only, and God wills, can work God's puppets. Best the word. Sorry, puppets. I'm sorry, puppets. Yeah, sorry, sorry. That's confusing sometimes, huh? Puppets. Okay, puppets. Our way, there is no last, no first. 2. The mother's motive in braving the danger to herself involved in keeping the child is remarkably put. When she saw that he was a goodly child, he heeded him. It was not only a mother's love that emboldened her as it does all weak creatures to shelter her offspring at her own peril, but something the look of the infant, that lay on her bosom, touched her with a dim hope. According to the Septuagint translation, both parents shared in this. And so the epistle of the Hebrews unite us in that which it is here attributed to the mother only. Stephen too speaks of Moses as a fair in God's sight, as if the present eyes of the parents were not blinded by love, but rather clear to see some token of divine benediction resting on him. The writer of the Hebrews leave the deed out of the category of instinctive maternal affection up to the higher level of faith. So we may believe that the aspect of her child awoke some prophetic vision in the mother's soul, that she and her husband were for those who cherished the hopes naturally born from the promise to Abraham, nurtured by Jacob and Joseph's dying wish to be buried in Canaan, and nurtured and matured by the tyranny of Pharaoh. Their faith at all events grasped the unseen God as their helper, and made Jochebed bold to break the terrible law, as a hen will fly in the face of a mastiff to shelter her brood. The faith perhaps also grasps the future deliverance and linked it in some way with the child. We may learn how transfiguring and ennobling to the gentlest, wickedest of faith in God, especially when it is allied with unselfish human love. These two are the strongest powers. With the iron war, the struggle is terrible. If they are united, the wickedest as David as an angel of God. Let us seek ever to blend the united strength in our own lives. Will it be sought too fanciful if we, such as that we are taught another lesson, namely, that is a faith which surrenders its earthly treasures to God in confidence and care is generally rewarded and vindicated by receiving them back again, glorified and sanctified by the altar on which they have been laid. Jochebed clams her recovered darling to her bosom with a deep gladness, and held him by a surer title. When Miriam brought him back at the princess's charge than ever before, we never feel the precious and his dear ones so much, nor are so calm in the joyful possession, as we have laid them in God's hands, that have learned how wise and wonderful his care is. No one? That's interesting, huh? You pray for us at this point, then move on.
Yes, Lord, I do. Lord, ask that you, Lord, that you would allow us to have our visions expanded to see, Lord, the reality that your ways are so much higher than our ways. Lord, that you are a knowing and wise Father, Lord, in all that you do. Lord, surely far wiser than our minds can comprehend, Lord, or understand. Lord, I do pray that this would be an encouragement to our faith and our trust in you, Lord, to know that you know all, Father, that you see all things, and that you respond, Lord, and act according to this same wisdom, Father. Mm-hmm. Lord, a wisdom that we ourselves, Lord, seek to know of, Lord, to partake of, and even to live according to. Lord, for surely there is nothing within you and your ways that is conflicting or contrary or inconsistent, Father. And so, Lord, it is these same constants, Lord, the same standard, Lord, that we seek to live according to ourselves, Lord, to thereby always be found, Lord, in a place of peace, or perhaps not a tranquil peace of that meaning, Lord, but rather a peace that is an assurance and a sure foundation in you, Lord, who are our rock and our Redeemer, Father. And so, Lord, I do pray for our perspectives of our own lives and the lives of others and our responsibilities, whether that be over the lives of others or of other cares that we have in this life. We would have the perspective over all these things that is inspired by you, Lord, and takes into account your wisdom and your goodness and your love, Lord, also your unwavering standards and your justice. I pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Jesus' name. I'll read on today, okay? Next time maybe you read. So that's okay. Maybe. That's a joke. So. Your voice from the other end is a break out a little bit. I'm recording this, so I better read a clear voice. So
okay.
Yeah. 3. How much the world's history that tiny coffer among the reeds held? How different that history would have been if, as might easily have happened, it floated away, or if the feeble life within it had willed itself dead unheard. The solemn possibility folded to the slumbering in an infant, always awful to a thoughtful mind, but except the manger and Bethlehem did ever cradle, hold the seed with so much as did that pamper's chest. The set of opinion the president minimizes the importance of the individual and exalts the spirit's period as a fact in history. Standing beside Miriam, we may learn truly with you to see that great epochs require great men, and that without such for leaders, no solid ones in the world progress is achieved. Think of the strange cradle floating on the Nile, and think of the strange grave among the mountains of Moab, and of all between, and ponder The same lesson that is taught in yet a higher fashion by Bethlehem and carry God's will of blessing the world is to fill man with his message. Let us draw from them, whether it be law or grace and truth. A man is needed through whom he may fructify to all. Fructify, I never heard that word. Or basically to make something fruitful, productive. 4. The sweet, pictureful, womanly compassion in Pharaoh's daughter is full of successions. Already noticed that her name is handed down by one tradition as Meres, and the Mere has been found as the appellation of a princess of the period. A rabbinical authority called her Bethuel, that is, daughter of Jehovah, but which was no doubt intended to imply that she became, in some sense, proselyte. This may have been only an inference from her protection for Moses. There is a singular and very obscure passage in 1 Chronicles 4:17 and 18, related to the genealogy of the certain myriad who seem to have had two wives, one the Jewish and the other Bethuel, the daughter of Pharaoh. We know no more about him or her, but Kiel thinks that Myriad probably lived before the Exodus, and it can scarcely be that the daughter of Pharaoh, his wife, is our princess, and that she actually became a daughter of Jehovah, and like her adopted child, refused the royal dignity and preferred reproach. In any case, the legend of her name is a tender and beautiful way of putting the belief that in her there was some good thing towards the God of Israel. But passing from that, the true woman's heart changes, languid curiosity into tenderness, and the whole compassion conquers pride, race, and station, as well as regard for her father's edict, as soon as the infant's cry, which touches every good woman's feelings, falls on her ear. One touch of nature makes the whole world kin. All the centuries are as nothing. The strange garb and the stranger mental and spiritual dress fade, and we have here a mere woman, affected, as every true sister for hers today would be, by the helpless willing. God has put that instinct there, a loss that is ever should be chalked by frivolity or pride, and frozen by indifference and self-indulgence. Gentle soul spring up in unfearable soil. Ramesses was a strange father for such a daughter. How came this dove in the watcher's cage? Her sweet pity beside her cold craft and cruelty is like the lamb caught by the lion. Note too that the gentlest pity makes the gentlest brave. She sees the child is a Hebrew. Her quick wit understood why it has been exposed. She took its part, the part of the poor weeping parents whom she can fancy, against the savage law. No doubt, as Egyptologists tell us, the princesses for the royal halls and separate household had abundant liberty for action. Still, it was bold to override the strict commands of such a monarch. It was not the self-willed sense of power, but the beauty daring of a compassionate woman, to which God committed the execution of his purposes. And that is a force which has much like work trust to it in modern society too. Our great cities swarm with children, exposed to a worse fate than the baby among the flames. Legislations, the official charity, have far too rough hands, too clumsy ways, to lift the little life out of the coffer and to dry the tears. We must look to Christian women to take a leaf out of the befouled book. First, it should use their eyes to see the fact that it not be so busy about their own luxury and comfort that they pass a poor peach covered boxes unnoticed. Then they should let the pitiful call touch the heart and not still themselves in indifference or ease. Then they should conquer prejudices of race, pride, station, fear for lowering themselves, loathing or contempt. That then they should yield to the impulses of their compassion, and never mind what difficulty the opponents may stand in the way of their saving the children. Christian women knew the obligation and the power, and live up to them as bravely as this Egyptian princess. There would be fewer little ones flung out to be eaten by crocodiles. May a poor child who is now abandoned from infancy to the devil would be rescued to grow up a servant of God. She, there by the Nile waters, in her gracious pity and prompt wisdom, is the type of what Christian womanhood, and indeed the whole Christian community, should be in relation to child life. 5. The great lesson of this incident, as for so much before, is the presence of God's wonderful providence working out his designs by all the play of human motives, in accordance with the law often seen in his dealings. It was needful that the deliverer should come from the heart of the system to which he was to set his brethren free. The same principle which set Saul of Tarsus to be trained as the faithful Gamaliel and made Luther a monk in the Augustinian convent, and Erfurt planted Moses in Pharaoh's palace and taught him the wisdom of Egypt, against which he was to contend. It was a strange irony of providence that put him so close to the throne which he was to shake. For the future work, he needed to be lifted above his people and to be familiar with the Egyptian court as well as with Egyptian learning. If he was to hate the war against idolatry and to rescue unwilling people from it, he must know the rottenness of the system. He must have lived close enough to it to know what went on behind the scenes, and how fully it smells. When near, he would gain influence over his countrymen by his connection with the Pharaoh, while his worst separation from them would at once prevent the spirit from being broken by oppression. It would give him a keener sympathy with the people than if he had himself been crushed by slavery. His culture, heathen as it was, supplies the material on which the divine spirit worked. God fashions the vessel and then filled it. Education is not the antagonist of inspiration. For the most part, the men whom God has used for his highly service have been training all the wisdom of their age. When it has been piled up into an altar, then the fire of the Lord falls. Our story teaches us that God's chosen instruments are immortal until the work is done. No matter how fallen may seem their outlook, or small the probability in their favor, or divergent from the goal may seem, the road he leads them, he watches them around that frail ark, half lost among the reeds. He has cast the impregnable shield of his purpose. All things serve that will. The current, the fall river, the lights, the flank that stop it from being borne down, the hour of the princess' bath, the direction of her idle glance, the cry of the child at the right moment, the impulse welling up in her heart the swift resolve, the innocent diplomacy of the cistern, the shelter of the happy mother's breast, the safety of the palace, all this, and 100 more trivial and unrelated things, are spun into the strong cable wherewith God draws slowly but surely his sacred purposes into act. So ever his chosen, unsecure as long as he has worked for them, and his mighty plan strides on to its accomplishment over all the barriers that man can erase. How deeply this story had impressed on devout minds the truth of divine protection for all who serve him is shown by the fact that the word employed in the last verses of our lesson and the translated John, of which the name Moses is a form, is used on the only occasion of its occurrence in the Old Testament, namely Psalm Psalm 18:16 in the duplicate in 2 Samuel 22:17 was a plain reference to our narrative. The psalmist described his own deliverance in answer to his cry by a grand manifestation of God's majesty. And this is the climax, is the purpose of the earthquake, the lightning, the darkness, the storm. He sent from above. He took me. He drew me out of many waters. The sin by the margins of the Nile so many years ago is but one transcendent instance of the working of the power which secures deliverance from encompassing perils, and for strangers, though it may be undistinguished, service to all who call upon him. God, who puts the compassion into the heart of Pharaoh's dusky daughter, is not less tender of heart than she, and when he hears us, though our cry be but as for an infant, with no language but a cry, he will come in his majesty and draw us from encompassing dangers and impending death. We cannot all be lawgivers and deliverers, but we may all appeal to his great pity and partake of deliverance like that Moses and David. That's a good place to stop. So, bless the Lord, Noah. What a reading, huh? So encouraging. Yeah, this is such a wonderful writer, such insight,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah. Learned man, I can tell. He's done a lot of reading himself.
he done a lot of reading himself. That's true. Bless the Lord. Bless the Lord. Um, well, I'm going to say goodbye to you, and may God bless you good day. So, and
All right, you as well.
we'll see you next week. So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much.
You bet.
Well,
Okay.
I guess.
Okay, bye then. Okay? Yeah.
All right.
Uh huh. Yeah.